This is the incident of April 10, 1912. RMS Titanic, the world's largest and most luxurious ship of its time, set out on its first voyage. It was traveling from Southampton, England to New York. All kinds of people were aboard, renowned industrialists and actors as well as immigrants, who were on their way to America in search of a better life. It was commanded by the 62-year-old senior captain Edward John Smith. There was a lot of excitement regarding this ship among the passengers, public, and the media. It was not only the world's largest ship, around 269 meters in length and more than 53 feet in height, but also the luxury of the ship was awe-inspiring. At that time, it cost $7.5 million to build. The facilities and decoration inside the ship could even leave a five-star hotel behind. Stained glass mirrors, ornate wood paneling, 2 grand staircases, a heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, an electric bath, a gym, a squash court, for restaurants, 2 barbershops, and a library as well. Moreover, the kind of safety features that were used to build the Titanic led people to believe that it was unsinkable. It was a ship that could never sink. It was that safe. White Star Line was the name of the company that built this ship. The vice president of the company was so confident about that, he came out in front of the public and said that this ship is unsinkable. But 2 days later, after setting out on its first ride, on April 12, 1912, Titanic began to get its first ice warnings. This meant the Atlantic Ocean that Titanic was crossing to get to America was filled with ice. There were mountains of icebergs that were dangerous to the ship. These warnings were not unusual. Ships that sailed the ocean often communicated through radio and signals of the nearby ships about ice being present in their way or that area. After getting these warnings, Titanic changed its course twice to avoid danger but did not reduce its speed. It continued its journey towards the destination at a speed of 21.5 knots, which equals 40 kilometers per hour. 2 days later, on April 14, 1912, there were 7 more ice warnings, but Captain Smith and his crew ignored these warnings. They did not slow the speed of the Titanic. Slowly, the day drew to a close, the sun set, and the temperature dropped. The notable thing about the night of April 14th was that the moon was not visible. Without the moon, there was no moonlight and the visibility was low. There was a crow's nest on the ship, a small platform at a height, which functioned as a lookout point. Someone was made to sit atop it to keep watch on the track of the ship and look for traffic or obstacles. The person sitting there had to face very low temperatures. The cold wind was blowing at a very fast pace. Moreover, it was night time and the cold winds made the eyes tear up, making it difficult to see. At 11:39 p.m., a man named Frederick Fleet was atop the crow's nest. Suddenly, he saw a huge iceberg in front of him. He rang the bell thrice quickly so that the people below could be alerted. Then, he picked up the phone and called the officers on the bridge. He urgently said that there was an iceberg in front of them and that the ship should be steered immediately. First Officer William Murdoch heard this message and signaled the engine room that the ship should be steered in the left direction. But unfortunately, it was too late. Just 1 minute later, at 11:40 p.m., the ship crashed into the iceberg. The iceberg was not a small one. It was 200 to 400 feet in length, as big as a football field, and so high that it matched the crow's nest in height. Scientists estimate that the iceberg weighed as much as 1.5 million tons. Titanic's front right side collided with the iceberg, specifically near the bow. Now, what is the bow? The bow is the part right at the front of the ship. For around 10 seconds, the ship grazed against the iceberg and a huge dent was formed. Due to this, small holes formed in the main part of the ship. You might wonder how this is possible. How can a piece of ice tear through metal? If you use the ice in your fridge, then yes, it won't cut through metal. But keep in mind the weight of a mountain of ice is 1.5 million tons. Since the iceberg was so big and heavy, it caused massive damage to the Titanic. A few seconds after the collision, the ship's captain, Smith, and architect Thomas Andrews arrived at the site to see how much damage the ship had incurred. When they saw, they realized that the ship would sink. They were completely shocked by this. They thought that the ship was unsinkable. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that the ship was considered unsinkable due to its impressive safety features. There were 2 main safety features which led to this belief. First, the ship had a double bottom hull. The main body of the ship is called the hull, and a double bottom hull means 2 layers. Even if the layer below got damaged, the second layer could save the ship. Second, the hull of the ship was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. Even if 4 out of 16 compartments were filled with water, the ship would still sail. It would make no difference to the ship. But the impact created by the iceberg was on the side of the ship. The double-bottom hull proved to be of no use. Second, the impact of the iceberg was so large that 6 out of 16 watertight compartments were breached. Water filled them. The limit was 4 compartments. The inundation of 6 compartments meant that the ship couldn't be saved from sinking. The unsinkable would sink. 20 minutes after the collision, at 12 a.m., Captain Smith ordered his crew members to send distress calls over the radio. They hoped nearby ships would detect the signal and come to save them. Senior radio operator Jack Phillips turned out to be the hero of our story. One after another, he began sending distress signals. There was no response. He sent another and another. There must be some ship out there that would pick up their distress call. 20 minutes later, at 12:20 a.m., there was a ship called RMS Carpathia that was near the Titanic. It detected the signal. The operator of the Carpathia spoke to the operator of the Titanic over the radio and directed his ship to move towards Titanic to save them. The problem was that despite its closeness, the Carpathia was still 107 kilometers away. Even moving towards the Titanic at its top speed, it would take 3.5 hours to reach the Titanic. Would the Titanic stay afloat for 3.5 hours? The rest of the crew members lit up flares and rockets in the sky, hoping that a ship nearby would notice them. But unfortunately, apart from the Carpathia, there was no response from any other ship. Meanwhile, Captain Smith ordered the evacuation of passengers using the lifeboats on the ship. As per protocol, women and children were given preference to board the lifeboats. As for the passengers on the ship, they were not very scared. Most passengers believed that Titanic was an unsinkable ship and there was no need to worry. After all, the company had advertised it again and again. So yes, they might have hit an iceberg, but the ship wouldn't sink. For this reason, the first lifeboat that went down had a capacity of 65 people, but only 28 went. Half the lifeboat remained empty as it was lowered. As time passed, compartments began to fill with water one after the other, and the ship began to tilt. Gradually, the passengers realized that the ship could sink. When this realization happened, hundreds of people began to run around in panic. By 1 a.m. in the night, so much water had filled the compartments in the front that the bow of the ship had gone underwater. Due to this, the rear part of the Titanic surfaced out of the water, and the propeller at the back surfaced out of the water. When the ship tilted to this degree, all people were scared, and people began to fight with one another for a seat in the lifeboat. The problem was there was just a scarcity of lifeboats on the ship. There were only 20 lifeboats which could accommodate only 1,200 people approximately, but there were around 2,200 people on the ship. At 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat was lowered from the Titanic, but 1,500 people were still on board. In this chaos, some people tried snatching places in the lifeboat, but some people had accepted their fate and stayed back on the ship. The end was chaotic. Everybody was crying, praying, trying to get into the few lifeboats that were left. As per eyewitnesses, the ship broke into two halves at around 2:20 a.m. and then slowly began to sink. It did not take even 3 hours for the unsinkable Titanic's first ride, the company wanted to break records. They wanted Titanic to reach New York quickly so they could make headlines and a name for themselves. After this accident, there were many changes to the safety regulations of the shipping industry. More than 70 years later, in September 1985, the remains of Titanic were found. It was at a depth of 3.3 kilometers in the sea. In 1985, when the wreckage was found, bacteria and other organisms were eating the Titanic slowly, turning it into a powdery substance. Scientists believe that after 20 years, there will be no remains of Titanic left. Friends, even after all these years, the story of Titanic continues to fascinate people. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more documentary case studies like this. Thank you for watching.